Hi, I'm Evan Reed. Today I'm here to talk to you about ECMAScript modules and everyone's favorite thing, standards and specifications on the web platform. Yeah, thank you. All right, so now for those of you who aren't aware, there are several organizations which work in consort to produce what we call the web platform. It's many different organizations, many teams, and several years of planning before features are added. And right here you can see the TC39, Technical Committee 39. They are the administrators of the ECMAScript specification that JavaScript is derived from. And it's important to understand that when we make applications on the web, we also utilize many other aspects of HTML and the DOM and a lot of APIs provided by browser vendors. One of those specifications that's slowly been coming to the browser is what's called a module system that's native to the browser. And this is something that all the groups here are involved in making, and it's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So, first let's talk about what a module is and what's required for them to work. Then I'll talk briefly about the history behind JavaScript and ES modules and their motivation, which will lead to why it's been like a long time coming and sort of like a rocky road along the way as well. Then I'll show you exactly what an ES module is and how they can be implemented right now. Finally, then I'll try to predict the future and speculate wildly about the future of development and how it'll affect all of us. So, what's a module anyway? Almost every programming language has this concept of a module system. And can everyone tell me what the greatest advantage of having modules are? What do modules give us?
Modularity.
Thanks, no. Right. Modules allow us generally to create one very large program, but split them into several parts. So we can better organize our projects. The file system lets us organize and give hierarchies to, just organize ourselves better. So beneath any module system, there's actually what's called a module loader. And that more or less joins the files into the larger program so it can be run into its full form. And before ES6, JavaScript really didn't have this module loader and no true way of providing modules at all. So before I dive deeper into the history behind this, let's talk about here and now and how we develop currently. So, because the language does not provide a module system, developers use tools called bundlers. We all are pretty familiar with Webpack. Bundlers have evolved like a great deal and provide us with a lot of features that have pushed JavaScript forward into the state of development that we know and love. Bundlers essentially glue together multiple files, but there's one really important feature to them, and that's they're able to do steps in between this bundling. They can do things like transpilation with Babel and minification, which is really great. And this aspect of transpilation during this bundling is really super important because there are other libraries and frameworks that have taken advantage of this feature. This is why React uses, and the React community has kind of agreed upon Webpack as the default bundler because we can use Babel and other kind of transpilation tools and libraries to translate JSX into actual usable JavaScript. So I really encourage you to take a look at the Webpack documentation. It does a really amazing things internally. It's really, really interesting stuff. Definitely take a look at Webpack's site if you're interested. So let's talk about the history. It's not well known, but there were plans for this module system all the way back to the early 2000s. ECMAScript had been planning for this for a long time. It's actually planned for the ES4 release, but in case any of you don't know, it just never happened. ES4 never happened. It was abandoned for a number of reasons. And since then, the ECMA group has standardized the release cycle into stages 1, 2, and 3, so it's much more efficient. And officially, ECMAScript has a module system in ES6, but there's a big problem and in its current adoption, and it's really the controversy with Node.js, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But when Node was being developed, this module specification did not exist. It was not standardized, and it kind of drove Node to adopt its own module system based on what was called the common JS spec. There were other competing standards, namely the AMD spec, the asynchronous module definition. Most of you might not be familiar with that. But because of this, Node currently does not support ES modules at all. And it is not compatible with any other internal module system. There are plans to support it in the future. I'll talk about that in a sec. But first, let's talk about ES modules in the browser. So, believe it or not, you can use this right now. Actually, this week, it was implemented under a flag in your Chrome browser, which is really cool. So this is how we would use a module in the browser. We would specify in the script type equals module, and that's it. We're done. I'll show you what that looks like right here. So on the side, we have 3 files, one that just declares some variables, one that runs those variables into a function and logs them out, and then an executor that actually executes the function from a separate module. And it works. It's great. But we'll talk about this right here. We can't do things like document.write because the module system built into the browser is actually asynchronous, so it won't let us do things like document.write. So there are some pretty interesting aspects of these modules in the browser. For one, they're asynchronously loaded, like I just mentioned, so you can't do things that would depend on stuff to be ready and there for you right now. These modules are also in strict mode by default, which means there are possible performance advantages in browsers that do support modules and other ES6 features that if your browser can support modules, then it can support all these ES6 features as well. So one way that we would possibly be able to have support for modules and the old way that we do things is this no module attribute, as you can see. If we have support for this module system, great, let's do everything with modules. Otherwise, if you don't support this module system, we have this no module where you can still run your bundle as just a script. And there are other possible performance upgrades coming in the future with what's called HTTP2, which has this push feature where you can actually fetch multiple files possibly faster than you would for one giant bundle file with HTTP 1.1. So it's cool to see how multiple technologies are possibly evolving together in consort like that. So lastly, one effective way of doing this would be to use the no module attribute. Let's keep going. So let's get to the real deal. Very recently, the Node.js Foundation announced that they were going to incorporate ES modules in hopefully Node version 9. There's some controversy with this. As we talked earlier, Node uses its own internal module system, like module.exports. And it's estimated that 20 to 30% of Node-based projects would break if Node just all of a sudden switched to ES modules. That's a huge problem. There were discussion with Node and TC39 a while back to introduce what was called unambiguous JavaScript grammar. It didn't make it through the committee process. They really wanted to push for it. It would have made a smoother transition, but for several reasons, TC39 denied it. And so Node has decided to go a different way, and that's to use a separate file extension, introduce this .mjs extension, which has caused a lot of heat. You can find it all over Hacker News. People are going crazy about it. There's reasons for this we won't get into, but just know that it's coming, and hopefully we'll all, deal with it. So what's next anyway? Today I'm going to try and predict the future a little bit. I think there's a little thoughts that might be going in your head too. There's concepts like ES modules that are added to the web platform, and once the web platform is incrementally updated like this, sometimes tools and frameworks will take advantage of this for good reason, for performance and things like that. So possibly it's likely that a framework or a development tool even will take advantage of this, and maybe even a bundler might start to transpile things in a way where it utilizes this internal native module system in the browser, which would be great. That's probably far off, and I just wanted to let you know because as we JavaScript developers know, it's important never to get too comfortable with the current mode of development, so things are always changing. And lastly, can you do this now? It's actually available. Safari was the first to implement this, believe it or not. It's available in Chrome Canary and Firefox Nightly, and like I mentioned, it's available under a flag right now in Chrome as well. It's coming in Node 9, so go out there, write some modules. Thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate it.